part of confession, the root of that is in this deep vulnerability, where what you're holding on to, you realize is like a cancer, or is eating at you in a way that you can no longer manage or contain. And the space between that is the necessity of vulnerability. I'm thinking about confession rightfully done, because there's ways that people conceive of confession like a flagellation, or
Flagellation?
not flatulation, but flagellation. Like beating themselves, like, oh, so it's more compounding shame. But confession has this, I think it's the process, like Father Gregory Boyle talks about, of returning one's self to themselves. You return to yourself in confession. And so it's this amazing thing of what we hold on to that kills us actually becomes the holy ground that we're standing on. Like, that doesn't make sense, because it seems that to be holy you have to be pure, but it really seems that holiness is predicated on a deep, deep sense of brokenness and out of rightness and disorientation, and that confession in that space of vulnerability connects us again with the other, right? So Dietrich Bonhoeffer says that all sin is social, which just means that it's all about relationship, right? Like my brokenness, I can't sequester it in a place inside of me that when I show up with my kids or my wife or with you, that's hidden, that it's present in some way, right? It's present in a dynamic in ways that really have ripple effects within relationships. And so confession, I think, is God's whisper, cry, His pleading, just to come back home to ourselves with Him and with others in community. I think that's why Bonhoeffer talks about, like, if you confess in your prayer closet, he said that really is avoiding God. So when you go into your prayer closet alone and you confess to this holy God, he said, why is it so easy to confess to this holy God in your prayer closet, but you go to another sinner who's done at least as much as you've done? Why is it so hard to open your mouth and to say those things? And he suggests that it's because where the two or three are gathered, it really constitutes Jesus' presence, right? And that in our prayer closet, we're avoiding God. That when the two or three, it's so difficult to say it to the other because we're really actually saying it in this presence of Christ. And that's where, and then our social lives are reconstructed and healed, our physical lives. We need the other to be able to lay hands on us, in a sense, and say, in the name of Jesus, you're forgiven, Therapists can't do that. Folks on the street can't do that. I mean, that happens in community and relationship, right? That's a necessity of the community of Christ, that because we have been forgiven. And I think the vulnerability is a necessity for confession. In the 12-step movement, there's a couple of steps. One is called the fourth step, which is this fearless moral inventory that you take about your life. And in my program, there's a number of questions that I answer about that. And it's really hard because you're writing down things that have been hidden away for a long time. Things that we do, that I did as a person. I just said, I'll never talk about this. That was a one-off, no harm, no foul. I slipped in, I slipped out, nobody saw that. You're writing all these things down. And you're tethered to your sponsor, you're tethered to community. And then the fifth step is where you tell your sponsor, another person, the exact nature of your wrongdoings. You basically read this. Yeah. So here I am having a whole life of hiddenness around alcohol and sex and around performance and hiding. It was just years of accumulated shame that I felt like I was almost like a spiritual bulimic. Like I'd ingest this kind of stuff that I was doing in my addiction, and then I'd go to the church and I'd kind of try to erp it up on the altar alone, and just, and it was just like I was a spiritual bulimic. And what cut that for me was, and reconstituted that for me, was doing it in this deep relationship with this other person that said everything, everything. And so as I sat across this man at a table and began to read my fifth step, I began to share with him things that no one had ever known, things I'd promised myself I'd never share, things that were benign, but and I was really nervous. I mean, I had this like panic attack before I was telling him, because I had parts of me buried in people, right? Parts of me, like I had kind of dug up and kind of stuck them in some people who knew some things, but the whole of my secrets, or the whole of the things in my head that told me why I wasn't ever going to be enough, or why it wasn't enough, or why I was always going to be a disappointment. Nobody knew all of that. It was never contained in one relationship. And so as I sat across from Kevin and shared with him, I just started weeping. I started crying. One, because I realized like how much hiding I had done, like the absolute patterns in my life of hiding, of numbing, of trying to take care of myself in the worst ways possible. And I just got to see the ugliness of it all. Denial is this massive thing that we can kind of say, it's the Monty Python, Black Knight gets his legs cut off, it's merely a flesh wound. My denial says that to me as everything's burning down around me. I can be saying, well, it's not that bad. And as I read this thing out, I just looked at myself. I was like, Isaiah, I am a man of unclean lips, And there's not a damn thing I could do about that besides face it. And him on the other side of the table, he asked me a couple questions. He said, did you leave anything out? And so I thought about it, and some stuff came up that I left out. He said, did you lie to me about anything? And I said, no, I didn't lie to you. And then he said to me, let me tell you some of my story. And he met me there with his story that although his details were different, they had estranged him from himself as much as my actions had estranged me from myself. And in Whole Foods on Alabama, I was set free of something that I had held for 35 years of my life. Like set free, like I was weightless. And I had never understood confession. I really thought it was about making God happy, or about getting it off my back. It restored me to myself. And so I think that was the beauty of it for me, because it was in relationship. It was in this beautiful space of not being compelled to have to do something. It wasn't guilt-driven or shame-driven. It was a space of invitation that says, have you had enough?